I love multiclassing, but some DMs just don't allow it.
Yeah, it begs the question, is multiclassing really as powerful as you think, or just does it make your character weaker overall?
I'm Nerdarchy Delves.
I'm Nerdarchy Delves. Welcome to Nerdarchy, for nerds, by nerds.
Now let's just see how much class we can get in this video.
Alright, so today's video, we really want to get into and dive into, is multiclassing hated as being overpowered? Is that a justifiable point of view for D&D and 5e?
Or is it, more underpowered because, you're missing out on all of those capstone, keystone abilities, for those upper level classes that you just can't get if you multiclass.
So we're going to try and figure out the ins and outs, and by the end of this video, determine, does it actually make your character weaker or stronger?
All right, so for this one, we do need to kind of make a difference, a note of level dipping versus like full-on multi-classing. Level dipping, taking one or two levels in a class to just kind of grab a little bit, but for the most part, your character is mostly whatever else is there, minus a few of the classes that get their abilities super high level. You're still going to get those keystone abilities. So for this particular discussion, we are looking at, taking at least 5 levels in your multi-class, which will push out of that end ability.
So the other thing is some of the objections that DMs have against multi-classing.
And for this, they kind of look at, two different options. Either mechanically it's breaking the game, or it's messing up the narrative. When you look at, all of a sudden, I'm taking, these levels as wizard, and because my character build that I'm working on says, well, now I'm going to take a level of wizard. Well, when were you training? When were you studying? Where did you go to college? How did any of this stuff work? How did all of a sudden did you pick up a book and now you're a wizard? It doesn't flow with the story if you look at particular things. Cleric, warlock, paladin, these are things that you can just kind of get power bestowed upon you. Whereas all of the other ones typically require some kind of training. And if you're not weaving that into the story, into the narrative, even in the background, some DMs who are focused on the actual story and flow of a real world timeline, which is not a problem, they think that kind of breaks how things should go.
Yeah, the narrative part of it. Also, druids and sorcerers are other characters where maybe the power could just awaken within you. The other place narratively that DMs really can have a problem, and I've seen, is when you do a lot of multi-class, and not like between two different classes, but between multiple classes, right? And also, I will say, we mentioned level dipping and how that's just taking 1 to 3 levels and then being done. Well, if you level dip in enough classes, then essentially you're full on multi-classing right at that point.
Yeah.
And it'll have the same effect even as if you just did 2 classes, but you kind of like went to the higher levels of them. And we'll kind of like get into what the drawbacks and advantages of that are shortly.
Now I'm a big fan of multi-classing. I either stick with one thing and go, or I might just bounce all over the place. If you're familiar with my character over on Mini Terrain Domain and Dawnbringers, he's got 1 level in Cleric, 4 levels of Barbarian, and everything else is in Paladin. And I've already hinted that he's going to take a 4th class before the game is over.
So those DMs would absolutely hate you.
Indeed.
So let us take a moment to thank our sponsor, which you're not going to hate, Dungeon Fog. It is a great piece of mapping software. You can use it to draw maps, and it is so intuitive, so easy to use. They look beautiful. They look gorgeous. It makes me feel like I'm drawing maps on graph paper all over again as a kid, only my maps never look so good. They're a sponsor that you can find the link to in the description to sign up for a free account to try it before you ever spend any money on it. Decide if you like it. We even make some of these maps in our own games and put them up on Patreon.
And if you'd like to support us over there, why not head over to patreon.com, check out Nerdarchy, and, see all of the fun things that we got going on over there.
Every month, as a reward, you'll receive 5e content for DMs and players alike. Like we said, we make those maps that we put over there that we use in our own games. We make magic items, sub-races, classes, drop-in encounters, and more. You can find a link down in the description.
I guess the first thing we kind of, should look at when we're talking about multiclassing is looking at those ability score requirements. Every class has something that they need at least a 13 in if you're going to multiclass in or out of. So it's something to consider and see how that's going to actually affect our decisions.
Yeah, more than likely, if you're multiclassing in two different classes, that means you require two 13s, which maybe they're in the same stat, maybe they're not. The more multiclassing you do, the more stat requirements there are. Certain classes actually require more stats, so that's another consideration as well.
So if you're looking at, Paladin, Monk, or Ranger, they all have multiple stats that they need 13s in. And if you're looking at, Fighter, like that actually has a choice. You can either have strength or dexterity. So there's definitely, some leeway. There's going to be some crossover. If you're looking at Bard and Warlock, they have the same. So you can always play around with those two as long as you got that, that 13. But come on, you probably do.
Yeah, so that's like the problem. One of the problems with multiclassing, right? The more diverse the multiclass is, the more the stat spread is, which ultimately dilutes your character, right? The things that you're supposed to be really good at, you're not going to be as good at because you needed higher stats elsewhere to make that multiclass work.
The other thing to really, factor in is the fact that when you are multiclassing, unless you're taking, just even blocks of 4, your ASIs, your ability score increases are, class dependent. So if you're not taking them in those, 4-section blocks, you are getting less stat bumps, less access to feats if you're playing with those, and therefore you will technically be mechanically underpowered in comparison to the other classes that are out there.
You're gonna start to fall behind if you don't strategically do those multiclassing levels, and sometimes you might be taking a level where you don't really want the level per se, but you just don't want to fall behind on those ASIs, the ability stat increases.
And then the other thing, that is kind of tie into that is sometimes there are features that will overlap. Both Rogue and Monk get access to evasion. All your martial classes get access to extra attack. So those kind of level 5, abilities wind up becoming a dead level because there's nothing extra you get for it, because that is, instead of attacking once, you attack twice. So it can hurt when you get those things.
Yeah, absolutely. Another place is your capstone abilities for classes. Listen, some of them are absolutely trash, so it doesn't matter. There's going to be games where you're not playing to 20th level, also not going to matter. But some of them are really good. Like the Barbarian has one of the best capstone abilities in the game, like that increase of +4 to strength and con, pushing you above the 20 maximum. That is super cool if you play that high. The Fighter's capstone ability is an extra attack improvement, really good. So these are considerations. If you're playing in those higher games, these are off the table for you.
Yeah, those things, do have the ability to push yourself, outside the realm, and it seems like they are more heavily weighted towards those higher level abilities. And when you decide to go away from that class, you lose out, and you lose out big.
Now, for your subclass capstone abilities, there's actually 8 character classes where they're 15th level or higher. So if you're doing a lot of multiclassing, there's a good chance you're not even going to be able to access those.
So that takes it, beyond just the core class ability capstone, and you can now cut out the subclass capstone ability, making you even less powerful, because again, those things can be weighted pretty high, because let's face it, there's a lot of power that's packed into those subclasses, and the higher the level, the better the ability. So you definitely lose out.
So one of the places where you lose out is when it comes to spell casting and spell slots. If you go with all classes that are spellcasters, you won't fall very far behind when it comes to your spell slots, or maybe not at all. Where you do lose out is on those higher level spells. Those higher level spells are almost always more powerful. Even if you upcast a spell, it's usually not as good as a spell that's already at that level.
It is rare to find a spell that will actually equal, an upcast. If you take Meteor Swarm and compare that to an upcasted fireball, they are miles apart in the amount of sheer damage that you can actually do. So no matter what you do with combining spellcasting classes together, you are never going to be able to equal dropping a meteor swarm. It just doesn't happen.
Or a wish spell.
Or a wish spell. So not getting access to those upper tier spells is massive if you're just talking about playing, a core spellcaster. But I'm a cleric wizard, and I had a lot of fun combining these levels and playing out these fun things. You know what? Have fun with it. Upcast your spells away, but you're not casting those.
Yeah, and obviously we're using level 9 spells, but like you can even go down to 5, 6, 7, and there's some really cool spells that you're not going to ever be able to cast, depending on what kind of level split you go with.
Indeed. So I guess, the other thing is looking at, the tiers of play, what are you actually getting at? I know that there are lots of people that we have talked to who have never seen or almost never see that high level gameplay. And when you talk to a lot of people and they talk about, oh, well, where do you usually play? It's like, 3 to 7 is where we wind up playing. We start low and never really get to level 10. So a lot of people are playing in that low tier game space anyway. So if that's really where you're playing, what is the problem with, multiclassing if you're never getting into those upper level abilities anyway?
Yeah, it won't matter nearly as much. You might have to delay things like getting that cool fireball spell or getting your extra attack, but it's not going to quite have the same effect as, not getting those higher level abilities. When you get to mid-level and high-level gameplay, that's where I feel like your multiclassers really begin to lag behind the standard, the single class party members. I've played, 20 levels of a fighter wizard, and I was never as strong a caster as just the bard, or the fighter that would just fight and they're getting 3, 4 attacks around. I could do cool tricks and fun things, and like I filled these niches. But even then, like it was tough. Like I was super tanky. It was hard for the DM to hit me. But when the DM did hit me, half my hit points were gone because I had a lot of wizard hit points, right? So these are like things to keep in mind. There's other areas where you'll really excel. You'll have like a super high initiative because you took a bunch of classes that give alternate stat bonuses and you took alert. Well, that's cool, but how often does it really matter that you go first unless assassin's part of your build and you're doing a bunch of stuff? So it doesn't come up as much. Getting a lot of skills and a lot of expertise is another area where multiclassing can be super useful. But also, it can make your character kind of a jerk to the rest of the party if you have all the skills and you're really good at them, and that's your thing. Well, then you're basically stepping on the toes of the rest of the party. They don't get a chance to be good at any skills.
And that can become a problem if you're the only one that's interested in that direction, that's fine. But if, as Dave says, there's other people who aren't able to solve that problem, you become the know-it-all. You become the one who, oh, this is Mr. Perfect or Miss Perfect over here. What do you do? So it is a good idea to have a fun character build, but also be aware of what the rest of the party can do. And there are times where you're going to fall behind. That aforementioned multi-class character, yeah, he's got levels of paladin, but he can't smite as good as the other paladin that I was traveling with, who was all levels in paladin. His smites were much better than mine because he had access to the higher level spell slots. He had access to more lay on hands because I had 5 levels of other classes that he didn't. So those are things to kind of, consider.
You can go the other way and build the Smitatron character that has a lot more spell slots than your typical paladin. But again, they're not going to be as good at fighting, right? Like, they won't have the hit points to take the hits. They won't be able to tank. Ultimately, multiclassing lets you do cool tricks, fill very specific niches, and maybe like build for a character class that doesn't already exist. But ultimately, in gameplay, what I've seen time and time again is single class characters end up with the more powerful abilities that are stronger if you're playing a mid-level to high-level game. Low-level game, I think multiclassing gives you enough cool tricks that probably pushes you a little bit above the other character classes. But then what happens is those other character classes begin outstripping the multi-classer. That being said, both can be a lot of fun in the game.
So I would say, low to mid, depending, low for sure, multiclassing is going to win out. You're going to have more things than other classes. Getting into mid, depending upon your particular build, you still might be able to outshine. But as you get from mid to high and then into high, it's going to definitely tip into the favor of the single class character that's done well.
So with that, I would say over the course of the campaign, multiclassing characters are weaker.
I would agree.
But of course, what do you think? What of some of your fun multiclassing builds do you think were completely off our rockers? Tell us why multiclassing is stronger if that's what you think, or why you agree if that's what you think.
While you're down there, don't forget to do all those things that make the YouTubes happy. Go ahead and click that like, share, subscribe, even click on that notification bell.
Quick reminder, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we drop new videos on the channel. Come back and check it out. Can't wait till then. Check out up here, 5e feats multiclassing without multiclassing.
So until next time, stay nerdy.